Intersection Magazine Podcast.
Welcome to Intersection Magazine Podcast. This month, or for the next few episodes, I'll be doing something a bit simple, but I hope it will be beneficial. The idea is to give you guys some bits and pieces of wisdom. I believe it's wisdom that you might benefit from as you do your work or in your entrepreneurial journey. I'm not giving you this advice as someone who's made billions or who's on the top of Forbes list or anything of that nature, or who's made it to the cover of Time magazine, but just as someone who is trying to learn as much as possible through everyday challenges. So there will be just short clips with some basic story and an idea that has emerged from that story that might be beneficial to you. I hope you enjoy these. Thank you. Now, as a web designer, you have several opportunities or several paths by which you can generate income. The first, of course, is by design of the website. The second is if you become a host of some kind. Now, there are several ways to do that. You can use your own hardware to create hosting services, web servers, email servers, and the rest. The other, of course, is by design, where you have a relationship with your client, establish some kind of conversational system with them, where you discuss content, structure, some kind of idea about how you will maintain the site, how often you maintain the site. So there are different paths by which you can make a decent amount of money, and of course provide a good service for your clients. Now, in the design part, in the maintenance part, as well as the hosting, you're probably going to find yourself having to handle other people's jobs. Maybe your client is dissatisfied and wants a more responsive host. Maybe your client doesn't like the design anymore. Maybe they heard someone say the design is outdated. Maybe something is wrong with the updates that you were promised. Perhaps the person who handles your updates is not updating the page as you would like them to do so. So there are many different paths by which your forms of engagement with your client are likely to change as a web designer, web design professional. For example, a couple of months ago now, probably 2-3 years, someone approached me and said, "Hey, we heard that you design web pages. We'd like you to take over the design of our site. So we're going to give you this contact that has been designing and hosting, and then you can transfer, or you can organize the process." Now, interestingly, this was my second time having to deal with a transfer process. So sometimes you will realize this as you do work. You face obstacles which are actually opportunities for you to learn, because your next assignment may be related to the obstacle you faced in the previous assignment. So one of my clients at some point, after a back and forth in which I was struggling with the amount that they were paying for the service because it was too little, decided that they needed to transfer their domain and host. They approached me, so I was directed by the client on how this process happens. Of course, I contacted my own hosts, which incidentally is Resellers Panel. Shoutouts to Resellers Panel. And they said they directed me through the 24/7 support system about how to handle the transfer. So went on with my client and I transferred the site to him. I felt a little bit sad because I was making some money, but not as much as I'd have made anyway. So the part of me was sad, but the other part was glad that this was finally gone, that I was no longer going to have to struggle with this process. So fast forward about maybe 2 years after that, I'm in a situation where I'm having to redesign a page, having to rehost a page from a different client. Now I was a little bit aware of some of the emotions that come with this process of receiving there's a certain code that you're supposed to be given by the person who's hosting the page, and you're supposed to put this in to prove that you have the rights to the transfer of the domain. And then of course you have to go into the documentation, figure out what kind of software, what kind of applications, what kind of system the old host was using. Were they using a content management system? Were they using the basic structure of a web page, which means you're talking about maybe JavaScript, CSS or cascading style sheets, and maybe HTML. So I found out that they were using WordPress, so that means that on my new site I had to set up a system that has its WordPress, or maybe manage some kind of transfer of file systems from one to the other. To cut a long story short, anyway, everything happened. The site was moved. Although I did face some challenges because of some missing files, I was forced to redesign the page under a smaller, less attractive system. And my new client, was a little bit kind of like the picky type, who needed to just who wanted the page to look and feel a certain way. So I gave them something, but the thing that I gave them was a little bit limited in scope and in potential. About a year after I'd hosted them for the service, the client now requested that I help them transfer the domain to somebody else to design and to manage. Now, there's a certain sadness that comes to you when you're asked to hand over the design of a site to somebody else. But I had conveniently ignored this sadness in my first project because I was getting the work. And that's really the lesson for this episode. It's you really have to be sensitive if you're a web designer, or if you're I suppose it covers all sorts of fields if you're coming in to replace somebody else who's done a job. And it matters because even if the person has done, especially if the person has done a decent job, you still have to be sensitive. If you're aware that they're professional, that they do a good job, and that maybe some kind of misunderstanding took place between them and the previous person, you need to be able to work out a method by which you can show appreciation to this person, and not just come in and just with all your bravado and take this person's place. And that's really the lesson for this episode. It's just that you have to be sensitive when you're taking over other people's jobs. Maybe this is why associations are so important. Maybe this is why standards are so important. Maybe this is why dispute mechanisms are important. Maybe this is why conflict resolution is so important. Maybe this is why, as I said, leagues of some sort have to be formed between people in the same profession, where you say, okay, hey, I've been asked to take over your job, but I will do it, but of course I will make sure that I give you some kind of compensation if your job was done in a good way and it's just a misunderstanding. Or maybe I will decline this job because we are part of a community. Or maybe I'll put you on my team, not present but in the background, so that you can continue to at least have an advisory role. So that's really the advice about taking other people's business, or taking over products, or taking over projects after other people have moved on or have been moved on. I hope you guys find this useful and valuable in your work. Thank you for listening.